Here's a case study in a corporate embezzlement scheme that we ran across a few years ago that might give some examples of how to identify the fraud, how it was discovered, and how to prevent it. This was the case where a company noticed that their budget numbers were off in their marketing, sales, and advertising department. The numbers just didn't add up. The cost of sales was too high, the gross profit was too low. So they suspected that there was something funny going on. At first they thought it might have been an accountant or bookkeeper doing something. And as an investigative agency, we went in and looked at the numbers and we narrowed it down to a few line items on the P&L. And then we started to observe from the outside and going closer to the center of the company to see what activities of employees affected those items and those numbers. So what we discovered was it was within the sales department and the sales budget. We weren't sure exactly what was being done. We first verified every possible vendor to see if there were any ghost vendors. Maybe somebody was paying money to vendors that didn't exist. All the vendors added up. Everything was verified. There were no vendors that were at a P.O. box out of somebody's house. They're all legitimate businesses. And then we got to where we were investigating some trade show expenses. And we talked to a trade show provider that there was a line item for the hotel and for the conference center and some line items for things like display electronics, for lighting, for some booth displays. And the trade show seemed kind of expensive, and we were talking to the trade show vendor and they said, well, it's that expensive because it's all inclusive. It includes lighting, the booth, the signs, all of the electronics. And that's where we found the red flag, because there were separate line items for each one of those expenses. So we went back and talked to those companies that provided those things to see maybe if they got paid for nothing or there was some kind of a kickback. Turns out they were paid, they were legitimate businesses. But what happened was this salesperson who was going to the trade shows and presenting the company's products was paying for the all-inclusive at the trade show and then buying these things separately and then reselling them to other presenters at the trade show and pocketing the money. And it seemed like a very complex scheme. We wondered why that happened. So we looked into this person's finances, and this is an employee who was making $280,000 a year. He was making about $26,000 a month, $26,000 a month. And we went through his finances and come to find out he was stealing about $2,200 a month through this scheme. His personal finances was short by exactly that much. He had a former spouse with alimony and child support and a boat with some payments and a condo and a bunch of other stuff. And he was short on his expenses about $2,000 a month. So we kind of dug into it a little more, and we discovered it would have been 100% preventable if there was a separate check and balance for these expenses and somebody verified each thing. Over the course of 3 or 4 years, he probably stole maybe only $40,000 or $50,000, but it was something where it was more of a waste of a good employee, because this company had to fire this person at that point. If it had been caught early, it could have been chalked up to, you know, an honest mistake, and maybe the employee could have been retained. But after 2 or 3 years of scheming, this valuable employee who was producing very good results for the company and had a very high success rate had to be let go, and it was a waste for both the company and for the employee. So this is where these preventable types of situations are good to catch early. Now, fortunately, this company did see something wrong in their metrics, and it was caught at some point, so it didn't escalate any further. They didn't lose millions of dollars. But catching it earlier might have given an example to where they could have either maybe diverted this person to another department, maybe found a replacement sooner so they didn't have to fill a large hole in their sales department after discovering this fraud after a very complex investigation.